Okay, चलिए, let's begin. Polynomials topic start कर रहे हैं. First of all, let's try to understand what polynomials are. So all of you are familiar with functions like these. For example, you have y equals 2x plus 3, let's say. It's a linear function, right? You have seen functions like this as well, 3x squared minus 5x plus 8, for instance. You've seen functions like this, y equals 4x cubed minus 2x squared plus 5x minus 7, and so on. The first function that I wrote there, it's a linear function because the highest power of x is 1. The second function that you see here, it's a quadratic function. The third function that you see here is cubic. After that, you have quartic, and so on. All of these together, these are called polynomials, right? So polynomials is like an umbrella term under which you have all of these different types of functions: linear, quadratic, cubic. These are all called polynomials. So in general, if we have anything in this form, anything like this, y equals ax raised to power n plus bx raised to power n minus 1 plus cx raised to power n minus 2, and so on, where you have integer powers of x being added or subtracted, there has to be a positive integer. That's important. N is a positive integer, the power that you have. You have integer powers of x. It could be cubic powers, square powers, linear powers, power 4, power 5, 6, and so on. They're being added or subtracted, plus, minus, or this is a polynomial. All right. So this is what we're going to study in this topic: linear, quadratic, cubic, quartic, and maybe higher powers functions like these. Okay. So that's what this topic is about. Now, the first thing that we want to do here is we want to understand how to divide polynomials, how to divide one polynomial by another polynomial. All right. So for instance, how to divide 2x squared plus 5x minus 3 over x minus 2, something like this. How do you do this division? Divide कैसे करेंगे? ये हमने आज देखना है सबसे पहले. Now, before we actually do this, let me show you how numbers are divided. Okay, numbers कैसे divide करते हैं? सबसे पहले वो देखते हैं. So it's just going to be a quick reminder of your grade 5 maths or grade 6 maths, whenever you learned division the very first time. Let's say we've got a number like this, 956, and we want to divide it by something. Let's say we want to divide it by, I don't know, let's say 7. 956 divided by 7, this is what we want to do. All right. So it's something like this: 956 divided by 7. This is the division that we want to do. Now, what process did we use to do it? Did we use to use for this? When we did it manually without a calculator, we used to do long division for this. So we would make a structure like this. We have 956 written, and in the middle like this, you have 7 written on the left. And now what you do is you think about how many times we have to multiply 7 such that you get a number that is the largest possible number less than 9. So 7 को किससे multiply करेंगे कि आपके पास 9 से छोटा number आए? You can multiply by 1 first. 7 times 1, what does that give you? 7 times 1, that gives you 7. And then what you used to do was you would subtract this number from the number on top. So 9 में से you subtract 7. What do you get from that? 9 minus 7, that is 2. And then you take out the next numbers. You take down the next numbers like this. So the next number is 5, and then 6 after that. And then you repeat the process. So What do you multiply 7 by to get a number that is less than 2? You can't. So what you do is you take these two numbers together, 25. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 2 is 14. 7 times 3 is 21. 21 से अगर आप ऊपर चले जाओगे तो आपको 25 से बड़ा number आ जाएगा. So what you do is you multiply by 3 here, and that gives you 3 times 7, which is 21. And you would write 21 here. Subtract this from the number on top. 25 minus 21, what's that? That is going to give you 4. And then bring down the next number, which is 6. What do you multiply 7 by to get the highest possible number, which is less than 46? 7 times 5 is going to give you 35. 7 times 6 is going to give you 42. So 42 से एक और आप step जाओगे तो 49 आ जाएगा. So you have to stop at 42. 7 times 6 gives you 42. You write 6 here. You write 42 here, and you subtract this number, and the result turns out to be 4. Now, can you multiply 7 by any number, any integer that gives you something less than 4? You can't. So when you reach the step, you stop and you don't go any further. And what you say is, this number that you have at the end is your remainder. This is the remainder. This number that you have on top, this used to be called the quotient. This number in the middle, जिसको आप divide कर रहे थे किसी और number के साथ, that's the dividend. And this number that you're dividing by, this is called the divisor. This is how this long division process used to work for numbers. So 956 over 7, we could write it like this in mixed form, if you remember. 136 whole, because that's the quotient that we're getting. And then we have 4 remainder, that's here, divided by this divisor, which is 7. So we could write 956 over 7 as a number like this, 136 whole 4 over 7. Another way of writing the same thing could be, you could say this is 136 plus 4 over 7. 956 over 7 is the same thing as 136 plus 4 over 7. आपने इसको split कर लिया इस तरह से different parts के अंदर. This is how the long division process used to work for numbers. All right. Now you get something very important from this as well, which we'll see when we do, which we'll actually use when we do polynomial division as well. And that is the relationship between these quantities: dividend, quotient, divisor, and remainder. If you think about this, what's 956? 956 is your dividend, right? 7 is the divisor. So dividend over divisor equals 136. 136 is your quotient, plus 4, which is the remainder, and 7, which is the divisor. So this is a very important relationship that you have to remember, that you have between dividend, divisor, quotient, and the remainder. This is how all of these quantities are related. You need to use this sometimes to simplify this fraction. Dividend over divisor. So dividend over divisor can be converted to this form. Dividend over divisor equals quotient plus remainder over divisor. ये आपको बहुत दफा आपको use करना पड़ता है. We'll see applications of this later in partial fractions. We'll also see applications of this in integration. Integration, maybe there are some particular kinds of fractions that are only that can only be integrated using this relationship. You first split the fraction using this, and then you integrate the fraction, right? So this is a very important identity. Keep this in mind. We'll come back to this later as well. But for now, this is how the numerical division used to work. This is how the numerical division used to work. Now what we want to do is we want to do something similar for polynomials as well. So rather than these numbers, we want to see what happens when we divide one polynomial by another polynomial, right? ये division हमें करनी है. उसका process भी जो है इसके बहुत similar है number वाले division के. That is what we want to learn first right now. Okay, I'm going to write down an example here. But okay, there's a run going on here. I'll take a 1-minute break as well. And then I'll write down an example here that we will use to learn polynomial division. कि हम एक polynomial को दूसरी polynomial से divide करते हैं तो वो process किस तरह से होता है. All right, chale, let's resume. So we want to do the long division process for polynomials now. Let's take an example. Let's say we've got a function or a polynomial like this, 6x cubed plus 2x squared minus 3x plus, I don't know, let's say 350. This is a polynomial that we've got. Divide this by x plus 4. We want to do this division. All right. Now, how do we start? We first of all make the structure that we have for the long division process. We write the dividend in the middle. Remember this number that you're dividing, this polynomial that you're dividing by another polynomial, this is called the dividend. This is the dividend. And the polynomial that you're dividing by, this is called the divisor. So you write the dividend here, 6x cubed plus 2x squared minus 3x plus 350. And then you make the structure like this. The polynomial that you have to divide by, x plus 4, you write that on the left side here, which is x plus 4. And now you have to follow through that process that is going to do the division. Now, how do we start? What you do here is you just look at the first terms initially. Only the first terms. Look at the first term of the dividend and also the first term of the divisor. Okay? Ignore everything else for now. Just look at the first terms. What you think about is, what do you multiply x by to get 6x cubed? What expression do you multiply x by so such that you get 6x cubed as the result? x को किससे multiply करेंगे तो 6x cube आएगा? What do you think? X into 6x squared, that is going to give you 6x cubed. So that's how we start. That's the first term that we have in the quotient. We say, let's multiply x plus 4 with 6x squared first. All right. That's how you get the first term of the quotient. Multiply 6x squared by x plus 4. Let's do this multiplication and see what that gives you. 6x squared into x, that's going to give you 6x cubed. Plus 4 into 6x squared, that gives you 24x squared. Right, so that's the first step. Now, once you're done with this, just like you used to do in numerical division, you subtract this number from the number on top. In this case, you subtract this whole term, this whole expression from the expression that you have on top. An easy way of doing this is that you change the signs of all terms in this expression. Change the sign of every single term. So 6x cubed, change the sign for this and then add it. So iska minus kar diya, yahan pe ye plus tha, you put minus there. Similarly, change sign for this as well. Instead of plus, you input minus there. Now, what's 6x cubed minus 6x cubed? This gets cancelled. So you got rid of the cube term. And now, what does this give you? 2x squared minus 24x squared. That is going to give you minus 22x squared. All right. And now what you do is you just bring down the rest of the terms as they are, minus 22x squared minus 3x plus 350. So that's first step done. You see this quotient that you have here, what that has helped you do is that you've gotten rid of the first term of the dividend already. So that's done. Now what you think about is, what do you multiply x by to get minus 22x squared? What expression do you multiply x by to get minus 22x squared? Now you've got to think about that. That's minus 22x. So x multiplied by minus 22x is going to give you minus 22x squared. So that's the next term that you've got in the quotient here. You say this is minus 22x. All right. Now you multiply minus 22x with this whole thing, minus 22x into x plus 4. What do you get from that? Minus 22x squared minus 22x into 4, that is minus 88 times x. And you repeat the same process. You have to subtract this expression from the expression on top. An easy way of doing this is that you change the signs of each term here. This is negative, so you make it positive. This is also negative, you make it positive. Now, minus 22x squared plus 22x squared, this is going to get cancelled. The first terms are always going to get cancelled. What do you get from this? Minus 3x plus 88x, that's 85x plus 350. And then you again repeat the process. What's the first term that you've got here? 85x. What do you multiply x by to get 85x? That's how you're going to get the next term in the quotient now. X multiplied by 85 gives you 85x. So you say you need to have 85 in the quotient here. Now you multiply 85 with this whole thing, and that gives you 85x plus 4 times 85. That's 170 into 2, which is 340. Repeat the process, change the signs. This becomes minus, this becomes minus. This gets cancelled. 350 minus 340, you get 10 at the end. Now, think of this again. What do you multiply x by to get 10? Any ideas? What number or what expression do we multiply x by to get 10? How would we continue this process?
No, sir, it's just
Anyone?
the remainder now.
It's just the remainder now. The reason for that is we can't multiply x by anything to get 10 now. We would have to divide now, right? So we'll have to divide by x to get rid of x and then get a constant. So we stop the process at this point. We can't go any further. This number that we got at the end is called the remainder. So you keep going on with the process until, let me actually write this here. You're going to stop when the degree of the remainder becomes less than the degree of the divisor. Remember, degree kya hoti thi? Degree means the highest power. What's the power here? It's 0 because there's no x. You can think of it as x power 0. What's the degree of the divisor? It's x power 1. जब remainder की degree कम हो जाए, divisor की highest, जब remainder की highest power कम हो जाए, divisor की highest power से, you stop at that point. Okay, so you can't go any further. This is your remainder. So from this long division process, what are you getting now? 10 is the remainder, and this number that you've got on top, this is your quotient. This is how the long division process works. All right, does this make sense to everyone? Any problem with any of these steps? Let me know if you have any issues with this. We'll do a couple of more examples just to make sure that you understand this well. But any problems until this point? Any particular step that you don't understand? Yeah, that's good. All right, so if there are no questions, let's try another one. Let's try another one. Now, this is something that you'll have to do very, very frequently in this topic. You'll have to divide one polynomial by another polynomial in almost every other question. So you need to understand this process very well. Let's take another example. Let's say we want to divide another polynomial. Let's say that looks like this: 4x raised to power 4 plus 5x cubed minus 2x squared plus x plus 1. This is the polynomial that I have. And I want to divide it by x squared minus 5x plus 2. Okay, so I want to do this division now. Again, how do we start? We make that structure. We write the dividend in the middle here. It's 4x raised to power 4 plus 5x cubed minus 2x squared plus x plus 1. Divide this by x squared minus 5x plus 2. How do we start? We look at the first term of the divisor and the first term of the dividend. So this is x squared. This is 4x raised to power 4. And you ask yourself, what do you have to multiply x squared by to get 4x raised to power 4? 4x squared. You multiply x squared by 4x squared, and that is going to give you 4x raised to power 4. So that's the first term that you have in the quotient then. Multiply 4x squared with this whole thing. What do you get from that? You get 4x raised to power 4 minus 5x times 4x squared, that is 20x cubed. 2 times 4x squared, that is 8x squared. And now you have to subtract this expression from the expression on top. So for that, you change the signs. You put minus here, plus here, minus here, and then add these expressions: 4x raised to power 4 minus 4x raised to power 4. This gets cancelled, and this should always happen whenever you're doing long division. The first terms always have to get cancelled. Then what's the next term? 5x cubed plus 20x cubed. That is giving me 25x cubed. Minus 2x squared minus 8x squared. That is minus 10x squared plus x plus 1. We bring down the next terms as they are. 25x cubed minus 10x squared plus x plus 1. Again, you look at the first terms. What do you have to multiply x squared by to get 25x cubed? X squared into 25x is going to give you 25x cubed. So that is the next term that you have in the quotient here, 25 times x. And then you multiply 25x with this whole thing. What does that give you? That gives you 25x cubed minus 5x into 25x, that is 125x squared. 25x times 2, that is 50x. All right. Now change the signs again. This becomes minus, plus, minus. The first terms get cancelled. Minus 10x squared plus 125x squared. That's going to give me 115x squared. X minus 50x, that's minus 49x. And then plus 1 as it is. Again, you look at the first terms. What do you have to multiply x squared by to get 115x squared? You multiply it by 115. Now 115 multiplied by this whole thing, what does that give me? That gives me 115x squared minus 5x times 115. What would that be? 115 into 5, that is 575. Yeah. So you get 575x. 115 times 2, that's 230. Change the signs again. Minus, plus, minus. This gets cancelled. 575 minus 49, that should give me 526x. 1 minus 230, that's 229. Again, you can think of the same thing as you used to do in the previous steps. What do you multiply x squared by to get 525x, 26x? And you would realize that you can't do this anymore. You'll actually have to divide at this point. So you stop here. And if you use this rule that we just wrote there earlier, you have to stop when the degree of the remainder becomes less than the degree of the divisor. And you see here, what's the degree of the remainder? Degree of the remainder is 1. Degree of the divisor is 2. Remainder की degree जब कम हो जाएगी, you are going to stop at that point. You can't go any further. And you say, the remainder is this thing. And this thing that you have on top there, that is the quotient. Does that make sense to everyone? Any problems with this? This is how the long division process works. You have to be very, very comfortable with this whole process. We'll actually do a number of examples when we're doing some questions on this as well. But let me know if you have any problem with the concept until this point. No questions? Okay, Josefa, we can't do that. So we're not going to multiply by 10x raised to power minus 1, because if you keep doing that, then there's like no end to it, right? So you keep repeating this process until infinity. 10x raised to power minus 1 से multiply करने का मतलब ये है, not in this example, I think you're asking about the previous example, वहाँ पे 10 आ रहा था. You're saying multiply this by 10x raised to power minus 1 because that's going to give you 10. But this is essentially division. 10x raised to power minus 1 का मतलब क्या है? You're actually multiplying by 10 over x, and you're dividing by x here. You're not allowed to divide by x. You can only multiply by x in the long division process, right? So you're not going to do this. You're going to stop at this point. You can't go any further. यहाँ से आगे और नहीं कर सकते कुछ. All right. So when you can't have negative powers of x here in the quotient. We can't have that. All right, because otherwise then there's no end to it. You can keep going on x power minus 1, minus 2, minus 3. It'll keep going on until negative infinity, right? So we have to stop at this point. जहाँ पे degree of remainder जो है, it becomes less than the degree of the divisor. Make sense? All right, good. Achha, now let's get back to this relationship that I wrote there. This is going to come in handy again and again. You have to memorize this relationship. Dividend over divisor equals quotient plus remainder over divisor. This is extremely important. Now, let me write that here again. We have dividend over divisor equals quotient plus the remainder over the divisor. So in this case, if we wanted, we don't always have to do this, but sometimes you need to use this particular thing. So you need to understand how to write these things using this identity. Dividend here is 4x raised to the power 4 plus 5x cubed minus 2x squared plus x plus 1. This is the dividend. You were dividing this by x squared minus 5x plus 2. This is the division that we have done here using this long division process. Now, once we're done with that division, we can actually break this fraction down into these two parts, quotient plus remainder over divisor. How does that work? What's the quotient that we found there? It's 4x squared plus 25x plus 115. So we can write it like this, 4x squared plus 115x, sorry, 25x plus 115 plus the remainder. Remainder here is 526x minus 229 divided by the divisor x squared minus 5x plus 2. So we could convert this fraction to these different parts now. And if you think about it, those of you who remember P3 integration, we'll come to that in a month or so. But this is going to make your integration much easier now. There's no way to integrate this thing directly. What you would have to do is you'd have to split it into two parts like this, and then you can integrate these separately. You can integrate this separately, every term individually, and you can also integrate this part separately. All right. So this is important. You need to remember this particular identity from polynomials, that dividend over divisor equals quotient plus remainder over divisor. ये identity अक्सर काम आती है बाद में. You've got to keep this in mind. ठीक है. Now this is how the long division process works. Now I'm going to write down another example here, and I'll ask you to attempt this, and then I'll tell you how to do that. Let's take this example. We want to divide, or let's say we want to find the remainder when 2x cubed minus 14x plus 16 is divided by x minus 2. And you want to do this using the long division process, right? So if you remember the remainder theorem, don't use that here. We want to do this using long division right now. ठीक है, long division करनी है, ये पूरा process apply करना है division वाला, and you have to figure out what's the remainder at the end. Okay, take a minute and try to do this using long division. So you have to, let me ask you, write it like this then. Okay, आप remainder theorem से ना कर रहे हो. Find the quotient and remainder, both of them. So you need the quotient and also remainder. Let me write that down here. Find the quotient and the remainder. ये दोनों चीज आपको figure out करनी है when you use this process. ठीक है? Take a couple of minutes. Every one of you should do this, and then we'll discuss this quickly. Okay, let's do this quickly. We've got the dividend 2x cubed minus 14x plus 16. And you want to divide it by x minus 2. And as I start doing this, you'll see we will actually run into a problem here. Although you can actually work like this, but it's going to become slightly confusing because of some reason. Let's try to understand what that reason is. So how do we start? How do we used to start? We look at the first term of the dividend, the first term of the divisor. What do you multiply x by to get 2x cubed? You multiply x by 2x squared. So that's the first term of the quotient that you've got there. Now 2x squared into x minus 2, what does that give you? That gives you 2x cubed minus 4x squared. Okay, change the signs. When you change the signs, this gets cancelled. And here you're going to be confused a little, and there's a very, very high probability that you'll end up making a mistake and write it something like this: minus 14 plus 4, that's minus 10, and then either x or x squared, because the problem is you've got x here and you've got x squared here. They're not like terms. इनको हम add subtract कर ही नहीं सकते हैं. Okay, although you could realize that at this point and then write it separately like this: minus 14x plus 4x squared, or in fact the other way around, the higher power first, 4x squared minus 14x plus 16. But there's a very high probability when you're doing it in flow, you make this mistake that you add these two terms together, even though it's not even possible. You can't add these two terms. They're not like terms. So whenever you're doing this long division process, you have to be a bit careful. If there is any term missing in the dividend or the divisor, you're going to leave some space for that. All right, ताकि like terms एक दूसरे के नीचे आ रही हो. ठीक है, like terms should be on top of each other in the same vertical line. How does that work? I'm going to erase this. This was just to demonstrate the problem that you're going to get into if you don't do that. Instead of writing the dividend like this, you're going to actually write it like this. You're going to say 2x cube, but then, 2x cube, but then after that, the x squared term is missing. X squared term is missing here. Now, you either leave some space for that. नीचे जब x squared term आ रही हो, वो इस space में आ जाए. And you write the x term and the constant term after that like this. And you make the structure like this. That's one possibility. Or instead of leaving the space, you could also just write 0x squared here, just to make sure that you know that the x squared term is missing. If there's no x squared term, you can actually say this is 0x squared because that evaluates to 0, and that will actually help you avoid this confusion. कि जब नीचे x square वाली term आ रही होगी, you would know कि अच्छा x square को आपने -14x के साथ नहीं add subtract करना. All right. So this is something that you always should do whenever you are dividing one polynomial by another. If there is any term missing in the polynomial, like in this case, you have the x squared term missing, you write 0 into that term, that power of x in place of that. All right, so that you have the like terms in the same vertical line, and that will save you from a lot of confusion. All right, it works the same way for the divisor as well. Sometimes, let's say in this case, the divisor was x squared minus 2, then you would write the divisor like this as well. You'd say this is x squared plus 0x minus 2. All right, otherwise you would end up getting some confusion when you're following this process. Okay, so whenever you have a term missing, you put 0 in place of that. Okay, make sure that you do that whenever you're doing this. All right, now let's do this division and see what we get from this. So once you're written like this, we just follow that same process. What do you multiply x by to get 2x cube? You multiply this by 2x squared. Now 2x squared into this whole thing, that gives us 2x cubed minus 2 times 2x squared, that is minus 4x squared. Now change the signs. This becomes minus, plus, this gets cancelled, 0 plus 4, that is 4x squared minus 14x plus 16. Again, repeat the process. What do you multiply x by to get 4x squared? X times 4x is going to give you 4x squared. So you multiply 4x with this whole thing now, and that gives you 4x squared minus 2 into 4x, which is 8x. Change the signs. This gets cancelled. Minus 14x plus 8x, that is minus 6x plus 16. Again, repeat the process. What do you multiply x by to get minus 6x? You multiply x by minus 6 for this. So you've got minus 6 in the quotient. Now minus 6 into this whole thing, that gives you minus 6x plus 12. Again, change the signs. This becomes plus, minus, this gets cancelled, and you're left with 4 at the end. So what's the quotient? If you have to write this now, the quotient that you're getting here is 2x squared plus 4x minus 6, and the remainder is 4. This is the remainder. Is this process clear to everyone? I wanted to make sure that we're spending enough time on this because now the whole topic depends on this. You're going to be doing this in every other question. So you can't afford doing any mistakes in this long division process. Is everyone comfortable with this? Any questions, any problems? because if there are no problems, I'm going to end this here. Tomorrow we are going to do the remainder theorem and the factor theorem, inshallah. All right.